You know, we always talk about mental health and wellness and depression, anxiety, and various other issues. But somewhere we really don't come off. We don't come often to hearing about people talk about loneliness. Loneliness is not an easy subject to understand. Sometimes we don't even realize that we are lonely, given that we are constantly surrounded with feeds and tweets and other types of social media engagements. We are possibly the most well-connected yet lonely generation. you know. So welcome to Hoopsters, the beautiful mind. Today we have with us Dr. Sudha Sagar, who is a professor of health services research at the University of South Carolina in the School of Public Health. And we are going to discuss a very important subject, the lonely generation, and how one need not be. Okay. So Sudha, thanks a lot for coming on the show. I mean, it's important that people like you do come and talk about these things because nobody really talks about these things anymore. We all go by the cliche of what is being talked in the public domain, or what is the latest hot subject in the media. So I think it's subject worth discussing when it's, I think, the most important subject that needs to be discussed. So to begin with, when we are having a talk before we got online, you decided to address this topic, you know, the, the lonely generation, how one needs not be. It is something we're all aware of deep within each of us, and we do not even accept it. That's the whole problem. We don't accept we are lonely, even though we all know we are lonely. And as a filmmaker, I do come across people, and after 5 minutes of conversation, they start talking about, how lonely they are. But for the first 5 minutes, they're all talking about, their social life, their party life, and their work life, and listening to them, it seems that everyone's, actually very well connected and living a happy life. But 5 minutes down, there is a story that comes out of loneliness. But that's for the adult section. But then we are coming to the children, which is the subject of discussion here. Why did you want to choose this subject? It's a very interesting subject. I don't hear many people talking about it or wanting to talk about it. So why did you choose it?
Well, first of all, let me, clarify that the key purpose of this particular segment of this interview, I wanted us to focus on the single child families. Yes. So I have personally related with children who are more expressive and they just speak about their anguish about being alone. They are constantly looking or asking their parents, Mama, when can we bring a baby from the hospital? Can we please bring one? I want to have a sister. I want to have a brother. And after observing these kids and trying to get to know them more, we just realize what an unprecedented change has come about in this generation. And we are expecting the children to cope with it by themselves without any preparation, without any compensatory tools or compensatory parenting mechanisms in order to engage the children in the activity of life. We think that if children obey you, you tell them you do this, you do that, or if you indulge the child, well, then that's fine enough. That is the engagement in life. But we are finding that as these children are growing up and as their previous generation that were single parents as they grew up, what we are finding is that the entire personality, the expectations, the process of relating with other people, all of these are very huge skills of life that without knowing it, people of our generation developed it without even knowing it, because we grew up in a milieu of children where you are with peers. You are not in a situation where you have two doting parents and then you have four doting grandparents, right? Your parents' parents and your mother's parents and your father's parents, all trying and vying with one another to please you, to make you happy, to keep bringing and putting stuff before you. But as you sincerely hear out children who are now growing up, and now that I have become more sensitive to it, as I hear them better, I see that to a large extent, what they need is really the companionship and the unconditional environment of a peer.
So what has been your research so far, and what kind of research has actually happened over time to understand what is happening in the present generation? Because say one generation back or two generation back, it was still a two child family, most of it at least. But today, if you look at the urban setup, it's more a single child family.
Right. And in fact, in the, in fact, in South India now, the the fertility rate, that is the number of children per woman, has now in fact come down to 1.4, which means that there are a very large number. As you know, there are certainly certain groups or certain population subgroups that tend to have more children, and perhaps even more than 3 or 4. So when you average it out, it is coming to 1.4, which means it's a massive, by and large, you can take it for granted that if a woman has a bachelor's degree or higher, now the norm is becoming to have one child. And there are many reasons for that. We can go into it at a later point. And it is this massiveness of this phenomenon that we have to pay attention. To come back to the question that you asked, what is the research on this? A research project done in Harvard University. It was a live project. That is, it was a socio-psychological project combined with medical outcomes of these cohorts. So what they did was they studied in that after World War II. World War II ended in 1945, right? So after World War II, they included, or they set up these groups of students who were getting enrolled into Harvard University for their bachelor's degree. They enrolled these people into a lifelong study of what happens, what is it that distinguishes why some children or some persons, who all people being exposed to the same environment, to the same influences of how to lead your life, how to be healthy, blah, blah, blah. And remember, when you're talking of Harvard, you're talking of people who were wealthy, because only wealthy people could afford to send their children to college in the 1940s. And to send them to Harvard, you had to be really, really wealthy. So it's like, okay, you have all these wealthy kids. Let's see what happens to them over their lifespan. What they found was these cohort, what is a cohort? Cohort is like, you follow, they all start together at one time point, and then they are marching through life. And as they march and march and march until, all of us have to die. So until their death, you follow them up. Follow-up was near 100%. They did not lose anybody to follow up. You can't say that, well, the ones who went away were the ones who did badly, and therefore you are finding these results. No, that's not the case. But they did a follow-up, and they found that these fraternal bondings that people developed, and people learned a lot of social and personal skills, how to relate to people, how to get that joy and enjoyment of another person's relationship, or reacting, or even simply discussing the political theme of the day. I would also like to put some time, a little bit of time, to give you some perspective on why we are where we are. Why is it that we have come to this, we have a single child situation. All of you, no doubt, when you go on the roads, remember how awfully snarled the traffic is, and how just a nightmare traffic is. We see signs of overcrowding all around us. And definitely, it is the population explosion that started right as soon after independence, when we became independent and we were able to take care of ourselves and use our own resources for our own development, since that time, as the population changed, the dynamic totally changed. That was what gave rise to a huge population bulge which happened in the 1980s and 70s, burgeoning into the 80s, which brought this massive realization to the entire Indian community, similarly to the Chinese community before that, in terms of we got to break this. Otherwise, put a break. When you say break, I don't mean break like this, but put a break on this. Otherwise, we are going nowhere. So rightly, out of the correct reasons, and there was correctly a reason, a rationale for why we went into huge overdrive, where we got into first 2-child families, and then immediately, very rapidly, we went into 1-child families.
See, it need not, the child growing up lonely or child, getting into the lonely scenario need not be just because he is a single child. It could be other circumstances. Like, for example, I had a sibling, but I was never close to her.
Mm-hmm.
Okay. And the close I was closest to my cousins, or I was closest to my friends. And that's how we sort of built a bond, like what you said was the beauty of the whole thing. And between the school and the Film Institute, there are two fraternities that we built up. But tell me one thing. Do you really think that, one question I wanted to, why are people lonely to begin with? Is it by choice, or is it because of circumstances?
So first of all, it's not a binary question. It doesn't have to be either or. A good number of people choose to be alone. Alone is not the same as lonely. People have different inclinations. So I would really, okay, I'll go down this rabbit hole just a little bit so that we don't end up into a completely different pathway. So definitely, persons can choose to be alone by themselves, especially those who are introvert type of people. They will tend to seek being themselves. They are more looking into things that they can do by themselves just by nature. And those people, such persons, they can be alone because they are alone, but they may not be lonely. They may be alone and eventually get lonely because they realize that they did not invest enough in developing relationships with other people. The need for social network can be different, but I am here in this study, in this particular segment, I'm not looking at loneliness and why we get lonely as a different matter. I'm looking at a structural, created, obligatory loneliness that we are imposing on a whole huge generation, and what we can do to alleviate it. And first of all, what are the results of that imposed situation that we have? Because it is that which we have to address first. The other thing, okay, whatever they chose, that is more like a counseling and a psychologist type of topic. Whereas in this case, I'm trying to address what that people need to be aware. What are the structural supports provided by fraternal networks that help us to become well-rounded and joyful or effective adults as we grow up? And what are some of the things that are automatically missing when you are a single child?
Okay, so to begin with, can we address the issue of what are the deficiencies that the single child face?
Right, excellent, good point. So the first thing that a single child, remember, a family is a very close network. In a family, there are so many good things, there are so many bad things. There is a shared history. When there is a family sibling network, there is a shared history, shared experience of how parents relate to one another, of whatever it is. Maybe the family is a poor family. So if it's a poor family, there is a certain maybe kind of hesitancy, or not hesitancy, there's a certain feeling of maybe inferiority when that family, children or family as a whole, is comparing with a more well-to-do family. But whatever it is, there is a shared experience which binds all of the children together into a peer group, and they learn how to support one another. They regardless of what happens in the future, there is a certain unconditional love and bonding that takes place within peers. You can say that, well, parents, there is no better unconditional love than parents. But remember, your parents are always at a much distant level. They are one generation away from you. What you experience as a child, what the bewilderment, the tabula rasa, have you heard of that? That is the clean slate with which a child is working their way through the world, is very different from an adult's perspective. So you may lose your, how many of you collect these various thingies like Comic-Con memoirs? Do people collect that? What do people collect these days, Bala? When we were there, we used to collect those little things, right? What those labels?
Absolutely. See, today they collect
So
things
what do
like
they collect?
some cricket cards or something like that. But beyond
Okay,
that,
great.
beyond that, not
What
much.
about any toys, like, like that bubble something,
Yeah,
bobblehead,
I don't know about
right?
that.
And the girls will collect Barbie dolls or something, or, I don't know, various things. Still, what I'm trying to say is, you have that common. Your parents did not collect Narnia memorabilia, right?
Yeah.
Your parents did not go to Comic-Con and have those Comic-Con thingies, whatever you people you have a relation, or or whatever excites you is not the same thing that excites your parents. So even though your parents give you unconditional love, they are also away from you. They are not the ones with whom you are going to grow up. They will not outlive you. You will outlive your parents. And therefore, developing your own peer network is very important. So the absence of that natural peer sibling network is one of the deficiencies that you have. The second very important thing that comes up is child motivation in order to succeed, in order to, simple. You take a child from a single child family, in general, on average, this has been my experience. You go to their house when somebody is trying to make their child eat. We never had that problem. It was like, sit all together, everybody will be, the food will be served, and then you're imitating your siblings. You eat normally, you engage with your appetite. You have been playing with your siblings, so you're hungry, and you are also thinking, oh my god, she will get 2 pakoras more if I don't eat quickly. So you will eat quickly, so you have competition, you have rivalry. All of these things are making you more towards the preparing you for a life where you have to be motivated, you have to postpone gratification, that is immediate gratification you have to postpone. You know that your friends are out there playing cricket, and man, I want to go there. But then you also know, my god, my brother, this fellow is coming first in his class all the time. I got to study, I got to somehow show my parents that I'm as good as my brother or sister. So you have all these competitive and various things that develop a achievement motivation within you.
One thing I notice when I'm dealing with parents and I'm dealing with children and the kindergarten, pre-kindergarten levels and all that, or even kindergarten level, is parents today have become extremely, what do you call it, demanding. It's not like in the earlier generations. Like if we take our generation, I mean, our parents didn't even know what we are doing to begin with. Okay, the second thing was when we had a fight or we did something, they sat with and discussed it, or they told us not to do it. There was a, but today, if one child gets into an argument or a fight with the other child, which happens to all of us, there's a big issue between the parents.
Correct.
Okay, that's one thing. And then the parent is not willing to listen to issues that a child might be having.
Right.
Okay, that's one thing which comes in. So how does one get over that? Because that seems to be a bigger issue, because the child always feels my mother, my father will support, because I've seen verbal fights,
Mm.
and the way the bossism with the parent, that's what I find is a huge difference between our generation and the new generation.
You mean bossism by the children over the parents, or
No,
the
the parents,
parents?
for example, okay, let me just say, if you went to you were with another four, five kids, okay, and as usual, something happens in the whole thing, right?
Mm.
The children fight, and things go wrong, and the parent instantly interferes,
Right.
okay, and supports the child, even the child is wrong,
Mm-hmm.
and blames it on the other children or other parents, and becomes a
Right.
big issue, and it's extremely common,
Right.
and the other problem is also when it goes slightly higher, and the teacher has said something to the child, the parent goes and fights in the school. And our
Right.
parents never even came to school, They had no
Right.
idea what we were doing. But today, that's the issue. The issue is the child is seeing his parents behave in a particular way from a very young age. And it's very more common than not.
Right.
Actually more common. What do you tell the parents about this? So this is the issue which I would look.
It is an extremely good, a good example that you have brought up. That was going to be my next most important tip for parents. And that is modeling the right behaviors, modeling the behavior of reasoning through a situation, reasoning through and fixing the issue where it belongs, and not be instinctively, tribally protecting your children. Those are called like tribal or clannish instincts that they revert to, as if they have to protect their child at all costs. And the child has developed that expectation because that is what the parents have brought them up to expect. And again, that is where again where parents have to, from childhood, if you have a commitment that finally we are not going to be with this child forever, and their primary relationships are going to be with their peers, so we are going to socialize them with peers no matter what, then many things fall into place. So the first thing, one of the most important things, is reasoning through a problem. We don't see that much in Indian families. First of all, the problem begins with the parents themselves. And that is again where modeling behaviors are important, where a rational approach and a rational solution to disputes is a very important part of raising a child well. So if they are not doing it well between themselves, that sort of egotistic approach of I am right no matter what kind of approach, that is the same thing that they transfer to when their child fights with another child, and then they transfer that I am right, therefore my child must be right, and therefore you are wrong.
Tell me one thing. We discussed about parents, helping out in the whole situation. How can the society at large help in these situations?
uh, I, that is a very good question. I think society is made of people. So let me, good. So it's a good point that you brought up. First of all, to the extent that society is made of people, it is change at the micro level that is going to manifest in change at the macro level, because all the micros put together become macro. But definitely society can provide certain help. First of all, in India, we have the most absent childcare system ever. You find that by and large, one of the persistent reasons why there is this single child issue or becoming so universal is because of the sex imbalance between men, the power that men have, and the role expectations and the role, what do you call that? Um, uh, the forced roles that we expect for women. So automatically, women are the ones who are being so heavily, what do you call, burdened with both the childbirth and the parenthood roles, that most of the time you find 1/2 of the Indian population, that is women, is very little utilized effectively because of the sexism in our culture. So the sexism has to subside, number one, where there is dignity of all types of labor, including childcare and changing the diapers between men and women. That has to come about, so that at least families where they feel that they would like their child to have another playmate in the house, or so it is possible that that can restore or bring back to some extent some two-child families, so that there can be a more balanced situation. But the second part also is where both parents have to realize that parenting is a joint responsibility, and the society has to realize that if we want to realize the true economic and the brain potential and the capacity potential of the female sex, we have to, at a social level, start a well established, safe, secure, affordable, and uniform, infant and child care system in our society, which is available to everybody, so that it doesn't matter whether a woman may have a undergraduate, like a bachelor's degree and going to work, or they may not even have a bachelor degree. Tomorrow, Modi is talking about a lot of factories and we are trying to industrialize wholesale. So if women can go to work and do that, if the women are not to cut off their potential just because of the maternal role, the biggest handicap that is there, I see in Indian society, which is not at all being addressed, is the issue of childcare from a very young age, let us say from a few months of age, that is reliable, that is scientifically trained childcare worker, childcare teachers, below Montessori level child care teachers or role models, and be able, so that all mothers should be able to feel completely confident that nothing is going to happen to my child. I'm going to drop my child off at the daycare center, go to work, and not have anything to worry about until I come back and pick up the child. Today, it has become a hit and miss. If you have all kinds of mom and pop and exploitative, sometimes even dangerous childcare situations, that many middle class families or families that are serious or worried about their child's welfare, finally the mother drops out of the workforce, and that becomes a very frustrating thing for women. There is no reason why, and that was absolutely my bottom line, that I would never ever succumb just because of having children, that I have to completely cut off my career and my ambitions for my intellectual ambitions. So that scope, that is, I think, the biggest lacuna in Indian society. And in fact, it is my interest that hopefully when I relocate back, it is going to be one of the central themes, I hope, of what I work on.
That's wonderful. But Sudha, coming to our point, when we are growing up, the whole neighborhood was your family.
Right.
I mean, your neighbors were as much your mother and father. They could scold you, they could scream at you.
Right.
They actually discipline you. And
right.
Unfortunately, today that system is gone. Even the fact that we are staying in apartment blocks where your neighbor is just about 20 feet away, and somewhere the media has played a very big role in creating this whole diversity. And media has created the fear into people's mind where everybody, you look at everybody with suspicion and fear. So the whole neighborhood syndrome itself has collapsed. So isn't it one of the things that society needs to bring back, the neighborhood syndrome? Your apartment blocks where 1,000 families living, and there are older families, there are grandparents in different houses, there are senior citizens in various houses. They can be part of the whole system of taking care or being there. And the media, I feel, I mean, even though I'm from media, but I feel that it has been the root cause of creating fear. So today, a neighbor does not trust other neighbor. Other neighbor has absolutely no role. We used to go to neighbors' house and have a breakfast and dinner whenever we felt like, when it was given.
Right.
But today, you're not supposed to eat in neighbor's house. You're not supposed to do this. You're not supposed to do that. So isn't that something which one needs to address? Is there a way we can address that?
There has to be. I agree with you saying that that has become an overriding factor in everything. The fact also is that things have become more unsafe. You find that human trafficking has become a big factor. In fact, my own maid servant, the maid servant who comes and works in my house, her neighbor, they all are in some small rental places in nearby. They come to the houses and work. That lady, after saving a lot of money, she has been sending her 2 children to a good school, because in the sense the school van comes and drops the children off. Those 2 children were kidnapped. And this, I was in India at the time. This incident never came in the newspaper, because when I'm in India, I buy newspaper every day. So the whole scale of human trafficking, of what do you call, danger to children, has escalated a lot, which means, again, child molestation I think was relatively very, very rare and uncommon before. But I now know some persons whom I know who have experienced child molestation. So what we want to recognize is, we cannot say that just you start putting your children into neighbors' houses and let them uh, go through. That was why I was putting that emphasis on why parents have to make an investment in play dates and stuff, because the world has changed. In the prior years, when the children had siblings, if something bad happened to them like that, where it's like an attempt at molestation or something, they would at least have a person of their age to talk and confide, and things would then perhaps come out. But with these children who are by themselves, we don't know the dynamics. I would not, in fact, I know that this is an interview segment, I myself would not feel comfortable. It is true, comfortable to say that, well, the society has to change and the neighborhood concept has to come back. Yes, it has to be a vetted neighborhood concept. Because when we were growing up, the same families, the same people would be in the neighborhood without any change for years and years and years. Now you have so much of people turning over. You have a rental person here this year, next year the rental person is different, and in apartments the rental turnover is so much. So there is less time to have the security of long-term relationships to guard against bad behaviors by people. And definitely we all walk to school and back. My house was near Navrang Theatre, and our school was at least, I would say, a kilometer, at least 1.2, 1.3 kilometer. And my sisters and I, we just walked. Even if we were two, that was enough. Two of us used to walk, or we would walk with other children. I'm telling you now, the situation that has happened in a very crowded, area of Cord Road Junction with the with the west of Cord Road point, that is where these kidnappings have happened. And nobody batted an eyelid surrounding, because we have all become so urbanized. So, it has become a faceless urban population. Nobody knows. In our time, if somebody saw that, they would go yell and rescue the children. She said nobody rescued it. It was at 4 o'clock in the afternoon. And as far as I know now, they have never heard from the 2 children again. So it is not a media created thing. And it is true, even if 1 or 2 such episodes happen, for the parent whose child was subjected to it, it is the agony of those parents forever. And it is the misery of those kids. We do not know why those little kids were taken, what was done to them, we do not know. And in the lawless society that we have become, or at least hopefully now we are starting to steer towards a better, what do you call, thing between right and wrong and enforcement of the law, with what we had become. I mean, I don't know. So I understand that we have to have a compromise, or we have to find solutions in spite of problems. And that was why I was saying that parents need to create these neighborhood bubbles between themselves, with other parents, maybe with other like-minded people who they feel they can trust, and try to have children playing together. Hopefully it is still within the neighborhood, and try to keep that part going. And I agree with you on that.
Can schools help in this whole process?
Excellent point. I think the schools should definitely try to do it. Now we have this whole system of, the Facebook groups and various, like our WhatsApp group, forming WhatsApp groups of parents of each neighborhood. For example, every school has the addresses with them. They could set up groupings of parents living within a certain walkable small area, and try to get people connected with one another. That is wonderful. It doesn't mean if if a parent's child is in the 4th standard, doesn't mean that the 5th standard child is suddenly not a suitable playmate. So if the 5th standard or 3rd standard or 6th standard child is a closer living person, yeah, form these groups. I think it's a very excellent question that you have put up. And with the amount of electronic media and electronic resources that we have now, I think schools have an excellent opportunity to help this process and help parents to get together.
So coming to the point, Huda, where do you think all this is leading to? Whether it's a single child, the loneliness, the impact of loneliness, or what solutions that can be provided. When at least as of now, somebody has to start the solution provision. Nobody's been talking about it. So where do you see all this going?
I think for one thing, definitely all change is one person at a time. And I cannot, especially when you are bringing up the issue of parents being, there were spoiled children than the children themselves, and they are making more spoiled children. So that, again, that brings back to the vast majority of these parents have been single children themselves. I can tell you that. I am confident of that. Or they may have had a sibling. Quite often the sibling is of an opposite sex, of the other sex. And so you find typically there is the divergence of bonding at a certain age, when boys prefer to model and deal with boys, and girls with girls. That also happens. But what we are saying is, because we have been a very one-sided society. As long as you study, you get those highest marks, you get into the engineering, you get into medicine, we have shut out every other part of personal life and personal development. Personal growth and development has been completely thrown by the wayside. Previously, it happened unconsciously because of all these uh, human networks and things that grew around us. Definitely one thing is, if there can be some uniformity in the examinations and the times that children get free for holidays, that is good. But on the other hand, you also have the majority of families are both parents working. As a result, they cannot take leave like that. In our days, the mother used to decamp with the children and go to her brother's house or some other family for the holidays, and it was still okay because it did not. But now both of them are working, and that is also one of the major constraints. I don't know the extent to which exams being on different times there may be some disruption there, but I'm thinking that by and large there will be common periods of time when they could all be together. But I think these logistical issues are more important. So I think one of the good, strong solutions would be summer camps, where summer camps, if we can have a systematic method of summer camps where people bring the children together, and where the summer camps which clearly advertise and say that building up character and building up children's core strengths is the objective of the summer camp. You cannot come and fight with us for everything, for whatever we do in order to get that chemistry going. Of course, we know that we should not beat and brutalize the child, because that also was another extreme which used to take place earlier. But we, where the parents, I think, creating a culture of self growth and being productive and decent human beings, that if we can build up that, becoming a decent human being and raising decent human beings, if we can build up that as definitely a part of the goal of society, and not only producing millions and millions of doctors and engineers and graphic artists so that they can churn out the dollars and the rupees as economic units of society, but also in terms of the culture and the decency and the quality of life. If we can build up that as a goal of society, one of the things you find that the lonely generation is given enough impetus in order to become good economic producers of society and get that material success. So for that, they will do everything to make the children study. Maybe the mother and the father will also get up at 5 o'clock in the morning in order to sit there and oversee the child's shoulder that they are going to study for the exam. But we have to get beyond that and have, but what you will find is that the success that you get at the end of it are going to be like ashes in your mouth, because then all that you have is a lot of money, the inability to deal with people, and an empty life.
What is the difference in parenting between, say, India and the West? You have seen both the countries.
Mhm.
What's the major difference? The way parents treat the children.
Okay. Excellent question. And I am very happy to talk about that, because what I see is the outcome. Let us look at the outcome. The outcome, you already talked about the parents here in India, how they behave. Probably most of them spoiled children themselves. The outcomes, how are parents here versus in India? For one thing, the main thing is parents take responsibility. That is what I have found here. And the excessive what do you call, spoiling that was received potentially by Indian parents is not that prevalent here, number one. Number two, parents also here become parents because they want to, mostly, and not because it is just the way the society is. Oh, after you get to be in your 20s, you have to get married, then you have to have your children. So it is a conscious decision. That's number one. Number two, parents are very actively engaged. You have no clue. The most richest, very wealthy children of very wealthy families, you find that they struggle hard in order to raise their children by themselves. They have the support of a very good childcare system, but the primary thing is they believe in the dignity of work. They believe in the dignity of labor, including whether it is cooking, doing everything in the house. Do what you need to do in order to run your own life, and not expect to have a host of servants around you to support you and spoil you, so that just because you happen to be rich, you can just mooch off of social society and social people. So, and the children learn that from their parents from the very early stage. And so when a child is 3 or 4 years old, the mothers will not say, oh, sit here, watch this YouTube video, watch this and thing. They will be, when they do the laundry, they'll say, hey, honey, can you come? Sweetie, come. Can you please fold these clothes for mama a little bit? Let me show you how to fold. So they, because they believe in the dignity of work, and that it is not just a woman's role to do XYZ, everybody is doing everything, and they engage the children in the what it takes to live, what it takes to keep a family, what it takes to keep the house clean, what it takes to keep our home. They make them engaged from childhood, and that is because they are doing it themselves. They are not sitting and watching nonsense on the YouTube, which I see many people in India. They think that, you know, just swirling the internet is kind of their bypass time. You know, time pass. Time pass is very common in India. I see very little of time pass going on here. They are constantly, or they'll say, hey, let's clean up the yard now. Okay, can you please take this little bag of dry leaves and put it over there? The child may not do or contribute that much. They may still, as they grow up, they will contribute, but that sense of partnership with children in everything that it takes to live life is there from childhood. And as a result, the children are very, very rarely, I have not seen spoiled children. They come to the dorms, they realize, oh my God, how many things mommy used to do for me, but still they would still do. But now they learn the hard way, and they learn to take responsibility for doing everything for themselves. Whereas in India, you would have these parents throw a bunch of servants at them, make them treat the servants very badly. We treat, I think in India, treat people, both parents model very bad behavior towards persons who help us. Again, it's because of the poor dignity of labor, and because of the despicable or, you know, despising poor people. All those things, I think, are very absent here, which makes the culture of parenting and the culture of child development so different.
What about
From
the parents, Indian parents who are settled in US now?
they learn it, because most of the Indians cannot afford to bring their mothers and fathers here in order to just be the proxy parents for their children. So, because, you know, you can't afford your parents' health insurance. So you just can't. It is not doable. So then what you do, and here, if you want to engage a servant, they will be very specific. Okay, I'm going to do exactly this. And for that, my hourly pay is so much. So parents learn to do things, and they also learn from other parents. They see that how my neighbor's kids are helping the dad when, or the mom when they are clipping the hedges, when, you know, trimming the hedges, cutting the grass, lifting things and doing. So parents, as soon as they come here, they learn everything. The majority of them learn. And in addition, they're in some senses, they go one little bit beyond, and that is they make their children study very well compared to American parents. Many American parents, they say, oh yeah, he'll be all right, she'll be all right, let her do what is, you know, what appeals to her or him. And whereas Indian parents are much more pushy with regard to what they want their child to excel in. And, you know, children adapt always. They will learn to satisfy their parents, and at the same time, uh, you know, what do you call, enjoy uh, the infrastructure and the environment provided by Western society.
So
And
what do you
all
think?
Indian parents here, they will take their children to daycare. In India, all that, nakra about, I don't want to leave my child in daycare. I want my grandmother, my mother will take care, or my this will take care, or it's, the mother is the best thing. Oh, they'll bring all those shlokas from whatever Rig Veda or whichever Veda is convenient at the time, and say that the mother is the one who has to take care of the children. There is no better substitute. There may not be, but that there are so many good things that come with childcare. All Indian parents, when they come here, they take them to childcare, and they realize how much better proxy parents those childcare workers are than we ourselves are fit to be. They realize that.
So, ending the whole thing on how the loneliness story. What are your last comments? What do you see?
My last comments is recognize that we have to go out of the way, whether we are the child, I am the child, if you are the child, or if you are a parent, you have an extra consciousness to deal with, that you have to invest in the ability to develop relationships and developing a bonding with a certain with a fraternity type relationship, fraternal type relationships with people of your peer generation. And it is parents highly important, the most critical duty that they have. It's their duty is not giving them blooming gadgets. I'm trying to avoid swearing, but their role is not to give them frigging gadgets or the best toy in the universe. Their role is to give their child a good human social network. And for that, the first thing the parents have to do is grow up yourself. Grow up, learn to take responsibility for all your relationships. Money is not the end of thing. You can stick your money up, where, but money is not the thing. What will make the richness of life for your child is relationships.
Thanks, Sudha. Also, please spread the word around, and also see if you can. There are other people who want to come and share their thoughts. Be part of the discussion, be part of the interviews, because we need every individual. I think and we have been sitting in the back row for too long now. Right. And what people don't realize is that what's happening now is going to affect them personally. They always think it's going to happen to somebody else, and that is
excellent
the
point.
Problem,
I think that will be your biggest motivating factor.
Oh yes, that's what
for getting people to accept it. Because I know, I have my colleague she is a psychiatrist. Damn it, she's a psychiatrist. And her husband is an ENT professor. They were my medical school classmates. They had 2 kids whom they raised boys. And both the boys committed suicide. There was no reason for them to commit suicide. And it is what I see from a distance, or whatever little interaction I've had with them and with people, is this utter inability to relate to the true business of life, which is living the richness of life. And when that is not there, and the children lose meaning, that is what they are going to do. And who is now suffering? So I think bringing that personal, trauma back to the center of the stage, that will become a permanent part of people's life if they don't take this problem in hand and handle it, both as part of their own self-growth and as part of investment in their children. They can see what's coming down the road for them, and that's not pretty.
Absolutely. No, that's the reason we are not trying to sugarcoat anything here. We want to put forward the fact the way it is, and we hope that more people will realize it. It's just being aware and being sensitized towards these things. It will take time, but I think we are on the right track. So let's see where it goes. So thank you very much.
The Beautiful Mind, simplifying mental health. For more mental health awareness videos by leading experts, log on to www.hoopsters.in.